Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, we have our usual roundup of stories affecting the Sikh community, and as the student protest continues in Punjab, the movement is clearly gathering momentum. Well, we have commentary from the Sikh Federation on the latest from Chandigarh. And in the US, as new regulations are rolled out by the government controlling the trucking industry, Sikh lobbies are now actively warning the deeply negative impact many of them will have on innocent Sikh truck drivers. And talking of regulations, the US Secretary of War, Peter Hegseth, is under serious fire himself as, again, Sikh lobbies warn him over his ban on beards in the US military. All this and more on today's show, but joining me, as always, is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our viewers out there. Thanks for tuning in yet once again. Some of your comments are just really interesting, and what I mean by that is just a lot of thought and respect going into them, and that makes it all that much more enjoyable for Angus and I to read, and we appreciate that you are taking the opportunity to be a part of the show with us. Now, what I will ask is for anybody who's watching right now, if you can hit the like button down below and share the video. We have noticed a big drop in our viewers, and we have a good feeling that it's got to do with being shadow banned and a lot of the Indutva media circus, we'll call it, is playing havoc on our numbers. So we would love for you to share and make sure you like the video. That'll give us an indication of how many of these views are not going through, or let us know if you're having a hard time finding or posting to the site. We'd appreciate that as well. But stick around and we'll see what comments did make it to the show tonight. Back to you, Angus.
Indeed. And James and I together. In the meantime, we'll be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community, and we will indeed take a look at loads of your great comments at the end of the show, so do stay tuned for that. Right, James, let's get underway. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
I thought tonight we'd start with a little light story here to make everybody kind of smile and laugh. If you can really laugh at a hijacking of a city transit bus in Hamilton, Ontario, this would be the case. Now, what had happened is that the transit bus pulled up to one of the stops at the main hubs, and the driver went in for a quick break, probably to use the restroom. Now, this person jumps on the bus with passengers already on it and drives away with the bus. Now, being a true Canadian, he's got to be polite and treat the passengers with respect, so he stops along the route and travels the route that the bus is supposed to go, picking up and dropping off passengers at all of the stops along the way. And if that wasn't odd enough, he was supporting the transit system because one person whose bus pass had expired, he actually refused them to get a ride on the transit bus because their pass had expired. Meanwhile, he's hijacked the bus and driving with a suspended driver's license. So just a funny story. I thought that would just kind of bring you a little smile today, that it's just got to be the most Canadian of hijackings you've ever heard of. Now, the 36-year-old man was arrested, and the Hamilton police have him in custody, where he will appear in court facing charges of theft over $5,000, possession over $5,000, obstructing police, and driving while prohibited. And I find it interesting that there's no kidnapping, there's no hijacking, there's none of these charges, and I guess that goes to show you that, if you're going to commit a crime, at least do it politely, and maybe you'll get off on some lighter charges. But yes, I thought that was just a funny story to start our day today. With that, though, we'll go on to other subjects that are not so funny. And of course, we know that the G7 summit was taking place. The foreign minister leaders, or the G7 leaders, were meeting in Niagara-on-the-Lake. That is a region in Ontario, Canada, of course, being hosted by Anita Anand. Now, what's really been quiet about the summit is whether or not there was going to be confrontation or at least acknowledgement between Canada and India when it came to Hardeep Singh Nijjar and other acts of transnational repression and foreign interference. From all of the press information and the meeting notes that I've read through the Government of Canada, I have yet to see any mention of the transnational repression, and specifically with Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Let's not take away from the fact, though, that it was very front and center when it came to the protests that were happening out on the streets in Niagara-on-the-Lake. There were groups not only of Sikh descent, but also the Chinese protesters were out there as well for various reasons. But it shows that everybody wanted to get their messages across, and I believe that they definitely did. Now, of course, we know that India was represented there by their minister, and as he was whisked away because of the fact that he was concerned about the protest that was going on. However, with that said, you'd think that maybe he would take an opportunity at some point throughout the summit or the meetings and the pressers to actually address the issue, which he did not. Now, what would go a long way? Well, obviously, we were expecting India to be held accountable for not only the assassination, but also the more recent information that came out through the Five Eyes release of information and the Canadian Security Intelligence Service releasing information that confirmed phone calls that went between individuals involved in the assassination and high-ups in the India government. Now, with this evidence being laid out very clearly and publicly, India can no longer state that they are unaware of any evidence. They can no longer claim that there is no evidence produced, and they can definitely not claim that they know nothing about their government involvement. So it has really blown the lid off of those narratives that the India government has been putting forward. With that said, though, of course, as we look at it, the protesters were there and they were out all night. Now, I didn't get a chance to pull up the images, but let me tell you, it was cold, it was wet, and it was miserable out there in terms of the weather, but that did not dissuade the protesters from holding their 24-hour protest as they had committed to. Now, Sikhs for Justice had sent out a very clear letter that put Anita Anand on notice that they expect for her and Prime Minister Mark Carney to confront these issues during what they call blood money diplomacy. And they are referring to the fact that we are holding all of these trade talks and security talks with Narendra Modi, with his cabinet and his ministers. At the same time, we are looking the other way when it comes to the accountability that needs to be addressed on this issue. This is not something that was a one-off. We know that there are others who have been targeted by the government of India and their proxies, whether that's the Bishnoi gang or others who were acting at the behest of the India government. But again, it's being overlooked at another prime opportunity where Canada is hosting another G7 ministers meeting. This is the wrap-up of Canada's time as president of the G7, and the rotation as it is rotates so that each nation leads the summit, leads the G7, and hosts meetings on their soil throughout the year that they are in that position. Therefore, we don't know when the next or where the next meetings will be held exactly or when, but we know that it was a prime opportunity on Canadian soil to address these issues, to make the most impact, and to make sure that the voices were heard. Now, as I said, Chinese people have been out there and they've been protesting as well, and that has got to do with Jimmy Lai. Jimmy Lai is a very wealthy businessman, a hotelier, and other interests, who was locked up in a Chinese or Hong Kong prison, and that was in 2020. And he is still languishing in that prison without any real charges or any potential release date set. So again, it looks like India and China are very much in the same bed when it comes to utilizing the justice system and prisons to just hold back anyone who is basically pro-democracy and speaking out against the transnational repression or other issues against the government. And the rest of the story, folks, you can see on our Substack. So we'll wrap that one up for now, because we also have one other story I wanted to get to tonight. And that is an update in relation to the Red Fort blast that killed. Now the death toll is up to 13. So last night we reported it was mixed numbers between 8 and 9 lives lost. Now it's up to 13 from people who were injured and succumbed to those injuries since yesterday when we last reported. As we look here, I wanted to also show you. Now, I didn't know what a Hyundai i20 car was because we don't have that model in Canada under that name. In Canada, I believe that most comparative for the Hyundai product line, I would say, is probably a Hyundai Accent. And it's a small hatchback. So again, we were talking last night about whether or not there was like propane tanks or whatever in the vehicle. And that does not seem to be the case given the amount of room inside this vehicle with allegedly one or two passengers in it as well. It looks to be as though it was a high-grade explosive of some sort and not just, propane tank that incidentally exploded. The police and the national security forces in India have confirmed that they are leading towards it being a terrorist attack. Here you can see where a CCTV camera had actually picked up moments of the blast there in New Delhi. Now, they have made several arrests, up to 12 at this point, being involved, and they are looking at extremists, and that, of course, being people who, including the driver of the vehicle, was reportedly at a mosque shortly before the actual explosion. Now, as this went on, the police service and their intelligence service in India has stated that they did arrest several people and actually found, I believe it was about 2,000 kilograms of explosives in one region. And as a result, those individuals in the vehicle seem to have panicked. And through their panic and whatever happened at that intersection caused the explosion of the articles that were in that vehicle. And as we look here, there's another image of the wreckage. So you can tell that this had to have been a very high level explosive to do this kind of damage. And this is just a very small area. This explosion was about 50 to 70 meters in the actual direct space. But of course, items flew much further than that. Now, as they are looking at the individuals, they have made arrests, but again, they are linking it to what's called the white collar plot, and that is the various extremist groups and others. Now, here in the story here, the officials confirmed the recovery of approximately 360 kilograms of ammonium nitrate, a key ingredient in improvised explosive devices, with a further 2,500 to 2,900 kilograms of other IED making materials, chemicals, detonators, and of course wires that were seized from residential buildings. They are stating that there is a link to the university on this event, as they also said that they are investigating the Jaish-e-Mohammed protesters who appeared on the outskirts of Srinagar. Now, they also are looking at this as a group of radical doctors, so not just some individuals at the lower scale of society. These are doctors and associate professors that are alleged to have been involved in the radicalization and this attack. They also say that it is linked to the Operation Sindoor, and in event it is a part of the retaliation and ongoing fight there. For those who have been arrested, Dr. Mazamil Ahmad Ghane, and I may have pronounced that wrong, but this individual is a native of Pulwama, J&K, and was arrested in Faridabad. And he was working as an assistant professor, as I said, at the Al Falah University, where the other individuals seem to have linkage as well. Now, the Al Falah University has come out publicly and stated that they were not involved in any type of activity, planning, and nor were they aware of any planned attacks. They are trying to distance themselves as far as they can away from these individuals who have been radicalized. Dr. Adil Ahmad Rather also arrested in the operation, originally from Quasgund in J&K, and he's also linked to the university and the medical profession. And finally, arrests of note was Dr. Shaheen Saeed, a female doctor from Lucknow, also detained in connection with the module. So as you can see, these are high up individuals, and something that Angus and I have spoken about before, and Angus actually did a story on this not too long ago about the fact that the people who are trying to instigate different acts of terror and different acts of foreign interference or transnational repression can often embed themselves in different teaching or different scholarly activities to give themselves that sense of legitimacy and to seem as though they are just there for proper and legitimate purposes. But here we again see how they try to embed into the culture, into society, but also when they're at a university and working with young minds that are thirsty for knowledge, they also have a risk of being radicalized. And I believe that there is probably a big part of why they chose these universities as trying to radicalize students as well when it came to these planned attacks. They do believe that the seizure of nearly 3,000 kilograms of explosive is the most critical fact of the entire investigation. With that said, it indicates that the deadly Red Fort blast was not the intended attack, but the intelligence sources believe the white-collar module was planning a much bigger attack, a series of coordinated, large-scale strikes modeled on the 26/11 attacks. Now, alleged targets included Delhi's Constitution Club, the I won't even pronounce that, the temple, and several malls. And that is very important to note because they don't know if this is the extent of what was being planned. There could be other caches of weapons and explosives hidden throughout the different regions, and there could be other attacks that are planned. So, of course, the security level has been upgraded, and all public and other large gathering facilities have been put on notice, as well as large religious facilities as well, to ensure that everyone is on high alert when it comes to watching for anything suspicious and to make sure it's reported. Angus, it is sad that the death toll has climbed, and again, this much deeper report is available on our Substack for those who are interested in looking at it further.
Interesting. There's an awful lot of question marks over this terrible bombing in Delhi, and there's an awful lot of things that sort of seem quite unusual on this one. It's a bit of a random act. I mean, terrorist acts, almost by definition, are perpetrated to not just terrorise a population, but to make a statement, to put forward a cause. That is what terrorists exist for.
Right.
But this attack was completely random. There has been no claim for responsibility, which in itself is quite unusual, because what's the point of setting off a bomb somewhere and not claiming responsibility? What was the point then? You achieve nothing other than you just kill a load of people. But for what? There's no political benefit from that. Therefore, it's a pretty pointless terrorist act. So there has been no claim for responsibility. Usually in a terrorist bombing, some groups are very quick to come forward saying it was us and this is why we set this bomb off, and they then lay out their manifesto, let's say it. But again, it's just weird that there has been no claim for responsibility for this. Also, I mean, clearly, it was not a propane tank or a gas tank. I mean, as you rightly said, James. I mean, we said this from the very, very beginning. When you see the pictures of the damage caused, I mean, that was no gas explosion, or if it was the world's. It was pretty powerful. No, it clearly was explosive. So it clearly was an explosion caused by explosives deliberately. Or well, no, that's the wrong term, because the next point I find interesting. Maybe this was accidental. Maybe it wasn't an intended bombing, particularly if, as some reports say, there were passengers in the car. Suicide bombers are known in the Islamic extremist world. That is what they do. They do suicide bombings, but they tend to be lone individuals. What's the point of having passengers in the car who have again given their lives? They've martyred themselves for the other two passengers could have done two other car bombings, for example. In other words, again, it just doesn't sit quite right. So again, it makes me wonder. Maybe this was not an actual intended unintended explosion. Maybe they were carrying explosives and they accidentally went off in the traffic or whatever. Again, we don't know. So there's an awful lot of speculation. And again, a lot of it is, most of our commenters who've commented on this, of course, have immediately jumped to the accusation, as we have indeed ourselves. Maybe it was a false flag. It could well be, again, because there's so many anomalies, let's say, compared to a normal terrorist bombing. And so many questions raised. It does actually raise this question: was it a false flag attack? Because again, nobody's rushed forward to claim responsibility, but all the accusations are immediately out there. You only need to go on social media to see where the accusations are immediately pointing at. Of course, it's the Islamic extremists, and who gains from this? Well. Of course, the BJP gained from it. The right-wing Hindutva forces gained from this bombing because, of course, they are anti-Islam. Their whole ethos is to drive the Muslims out of India. So, of course, when events like this, terrible tragedies like this occur, it gives them ammunition to say, well, we need to get rid of the Muslims out of our nation. And again, it brings up the whole J&K issue. We need to take further control of J&K. We need to kick the Muslims out of J&K, etc., etc. So again, it does feed this accusation that maybe it was a false flag. I don't know. Again, it's just pure speculation. But as I say, there are an awful lot of anomalies with this, and I haven't yet seen any overt accusations against the Khalistan movement. Again, that's a great thing. And of course, there's no way the Khalistan movement would sink to such methods. It doesn't need to. It is winning the propaganda war. It is winning the whole battle for Khalistan through peaceful and democratic means. So it is absolutely not even unlikely. It's just impossible it would be anything to do with the Khalistan cause. So, which I think again is why Hindutva is not even accusing Khalistan, because they know how incredible, literally incredible, those accusations would be. So yeah, I think we'll just see how this unfolds. Clearly, there are Islamic extremists operating in India, particularly in J&K. That we can't deny that. Definitely, there are there. But as I say, this whole story, I think it's slightly strange. I do wonder if it literally was an accidental bombing. That there were bigger plans in motion, and this was an accidental explosion leading up to something bigger. Let's hope not. But anyway, thoughts with the relatives as always. And I just want to quickly go to the G7 meeting. Well done to Sikhs for Justice. Well done for the Sikh community for getting out there once again with the Khalistan flags, getting out there, being seen, getting visual, getting the cameras on you and raising the Khalistan cause at the G7. Of course, all the world's cameras are there. They are filming these things. They're asking the questions. So well done to all the protesters out there. It doesn't matter how small or big the protest is. Obviously, the bigger the better. But just the fact that you are out there with the Khalistan flags, peacefully demonstrating, peacefully highlighting what the issues that we're talking about on a daily basis. Well done for that. It's interesting, this sort of schizophrenic view of the G7 nations, and particularly the Western democratic nations. It's a perfectly valid argument to say, why are we hosting the likes of Jaishankar, the foreign minister of India? But then again, you could say, well, why are we hosting China, this authoritarian regime that we do know is overtly abusing human rights with the Uyghurs and etc. in Western China? So the reality is that it has to be this sort of schizophrenic approach to these authoritarian regimes. We still have to talk to them. We still have to make deals. We still have to all operate on this one small planet that we all live on. So unfortunately, there has to be practically this pragmatic approach to dealing with these nations. But that does not mean we can't raise these issues of human rights abuses, as indeed we do with China regularly. Certainly the UK with our historic links with Hong Kong. But we do globally raise these issues. But the question really comes back to Canada and the US and the UK as well. Why are we inviting Jaishankar? Why are we actually hosting India? So India is not a member of the G7. So why are we hosting them? It's essentially rewarding their bad behaviour. Now, again, there is a pragmatic approach to this. We do need to bring India on side. We do need to talk to India. It is, firstly, one of the biggest commercial markets on the planet by virtue of its sheer size and its demographics. And we do need to have friendly diplomatic relations with these nations, just so we can all practically operate and work together on this planet. However, what is disappointing disappointing is that we still do not publicly raise the issue of human rights. They are always brushed under the carpet. We don't even mention these human rights abuses. I mean, certainly I saw Yvette Cooper, one of our UK government ministers, our foreign minister, again, another pretty ineffectual, I would relatively say, incompetent politician from the UK. It's almost embarrassing to see these people, certainly our own politicians, there on the world stage, thinking, is that really the best that we, of 70 million people here in the UK, can put forward as our foreign minister? Again, it's pretty embarrassing. But anyway, that's another issue. But ultimately, yes, I think India's attitude clearly is, we got away with it. We've murdered Nijar, we tried to murder Panoon, we murdered Avtar Singh Kandar, we've murdered all sorts of Khalistan campaigners the world over. And do you know what? We got away with it, because look at us. We're sitting at the top table, we're shaking hands with world leaders, and they're not even mentioning it. That's the point. They're not even mentioning it. But again, I talk about this schizophrenic approach. That is actually on the public cameras. Behind the scenes, clearly, there is a lot going on. We have the legal cases over the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar and Gurpatwant Singh Panoon plot. So there are things going on beneath the surface. And India knows that we're doing it. We know that India knows we're doing it. So we all know that India's guilty of this. It's the worst kept secret, so we all know about it. So in the public cameras, we're shaking hands, but away from the cameras, we all know what's going on. We all know India's guilty, and India knows that we know that they know, etc., etc. So again, it's sort of this sort of weird schizophrenic approach. Ultimately, what it really all boils down to is real politics. It's all about deals. It's all about making deals. Now, unfortunately for us and the Sikh people, human rights are pretty low down the priority. They're always used as a bit of a bargaining chip. When the bigger deals are always made over trade, over money. Money drives the world. We can't change that. Unfortunately, that's just a weakness, a flaw in human nature, is that money, wealth, greed, whatever, it is the overriding human emotion. We can't change that. Human rights, sadly, seem to fall sort of much lower down the priority list when it comes to discussing money, trade, greed, deals, etc. However, fortunately, where it does come in is when there's a bit of a deadlock or when it needs a bit of leverage to push a deal over the line, saying, okay, well, what about human rights abuses? You agree to do X, Y, Z, then we'll sign this deal with you. So in other words, it's used as almost as an afterthought, but it does have leverage in these trade deals. So the hope is that, and again, we always say that politicians take the path of least resistance. If we can prove to the world leaders, to the United Nations, that Khalistan is a path of least resistance, it does bring with it so many solutions to the regional issues, to the geopolitics of the subcontinent, that it does provide the West with advantages. It does provide peace between India and Pakistan, plus all the other advantages. In other words, everybody's a winner out of the establishment of Khalistan. Then Khalistan does become one of these bargaining chips in these deals. Look, we'll do a trade deal. Look, your human rights abuses we're horrified by it. But if you bring in Khalistan, which solves so many of these issues, then we'll sign this deal, etc. So you can start to see how it becomes a bit of a bargaining chip. What is imperative on the Khalistan movement is it presents itself to the negotiators, saying, look, here is a bargaining chip and all the advantages that Khalistan bring with it. Use this in your negotiations with India, with Pakistan, and indeed with China. And you get it alongside, and here is an easy solution. Here is a path of least resistance that might help facilitate a deal, a bigger deal in other areas, etc. So that's the hope that's going on behind the scenes. I believe that is the case. But as I say, it's very much up to the Sikh community, the Khalistan movement. You've got to present the whole Khalistan cause as this positive bargaining chip and all the benefits it brings to all parties, not just the Sikh community, but to the West and indeed to India itself. So that's my thoughts on those, James.
Absolutely. And I mean, Anita Anand was directly asked about various topics, and she kind of brushed them all off, stating that they do bring up these human rights and other things when they get the opportunity, but that this several-day meeting course was so jam-packed, dealing with everything from, of course, Syria and Haiti and Ukraine, that they really didn't have a lot of time to talk off subject on those. So she kind of brushed it aside, and that is concerning to a lot of people because it's a prime opportunity to deal with these things as well, as I stated. And the other question, of course, is will there be any closed door meetings that'll happen off to the side in the breakout rooms between India and China, and what will they be discussing if that is the case? Because it gives them a prime opportunity to meet under the cloak of the G7 without, drawing a lot of international questions about their furtherance and supporting, whether it's China's support of Russia throughout, several different areas of weapons and defense, or with India's backdoor deals that they have with China that are in contradiction to what they're trying to do with security and intelligence with the Western nations.
Yes, it's the back doors or the closed door meetings that really matter, and of course we never find out what's discussed in those meetings. But that's where the real deal's done and the real conversations are being had. So I've no doubt that the whole issues of human rights and the abuses of Sikhs and even and the Khalistan cause will be discussed in these closed door meetings. Yeah. So anyway, as I say, it's very much beholden on the Khalistan movement to present its case positively and make sure it does become a very useful bargaining chip. Right, talking of which, let's move across to the Punjab and Punjab University. This is a story that is still rumbling on. There's an awful lot still happening, and I'd point our audience to the previous shows where we've talked about this, and indeed to a podcast that I've just recorded. It'll be uploaded overnight. Will appear tomorrow with Dr. Grewal, where we actually talk about the protests happening in Chandigarh at Punjab University, because of course this story has the potential to really grow into something much bigger and much more significant than it appears at first sight. At first sight, it is this argument of central control of the centre, the Indian state trying to take control of this relatively autonomous university of Punjab, which has this huge heritage and history, very much representative of Sikh culture and its history. And it was established, as I say, back in the 19th century, but it does actually have educational roots back into the Sikh empire itself. So this is why it's very, very significant. And this is why actually the students who attend this university are so motivated to prevent and push back on this central control. By central control, read RSS control, because the RSS are still terrified of this university. It is a nurturing pot for potential dissent. It is again, it can and has nurtured a lot of the feelings towards Khalistan and this sort of independence movement. And this is why, again, they want to bring it much more under their control, like they have done with the SGPC, like they have done with the Shiromani Akali Dal. So this is why the RSS are so intent on trying to bring this one of the final sort of independent bastions of Sikhi back in or under their control, to again try and really bury the Khalistan movement and bury the secessionist movement. So again, the students have been magnificent. They are protesting, and the thing is, despite the fact that the Hindutva RSS and the government central control have actually pulled back on their demands to democratise the university, to try and again take full control of the university. They've pulled back on that, at least temporarily. The students are not having it. The students are saying, no, that we need you to absolutely categorically and very clearly not just pull back on this, but cancel any plans that you had to de-democratise the university. This is our university, hands off. Now, the good thing that's happening here is these protests are not just happening, they're growing. And more people are coming in from other regions, from other states, from Maharashtra, from Uttar Pradesh, and from Haryana. Is that the movement is growing? And again, we talk regularly about how student movements literally have the power to topple government. You only need to look over the border into Bangladesh to see what happened last summer. And Sheikh Hasina, the government fell because of uprisings that were initiated by students. Student uprisings, student protests brought about that downfall. Now, again, as I talk about in the podcast, this student protest isn't going to bring down the Indian government. There's no chance of that, because unlike other student protests, the Indian government is popular. We have an 80% Hindu population in India, so it remains majority popular, unlike in Bangladesh, etc. So this protest will not bring down the Indian government, but this protest could have other issues. And I often talk about a catalytic event that could bring about massive change in India, and ultimately the potential breakup, the balkanization of India. It is catalytic events, these unforeseeable events that start to build up like this boulder or even a snowball. It's rolling down a hill. It gathers momentum. It builds up momentum and size until suddenly it becomes an unstoppable force. And this is potentially what could be happening here. In the Punjab, these student protests are this snowball rolling down a hill. They are gathering momentum. More and more people are pouring into this, giving it weight, lending it mass, lending it momentum. And this is what actually is terrifying the Indian state. The Indian government are actually starting to get a little bit concerned about this. And as I say, our full support to the students, because you've got something going here. Something is really happening. Now, anyway, I'm just going to play a quick video. The Sikh Federation, of course, all the Sikh community and Sikh organisations, they've all got something to say about this. And of course, right across social media, loads of support really pouring into these protesters. Because again, there's an awful lot at stake here. And I say it's not just the independence of a very historic old Sikh university or Punjabi university. It is everything that comes along with it. It is this again. It's this persecution of Sikhs, and this is the pushback. So this is the Sikh Federation. This is their release statement.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Many of you would have been following the events in Punjab University over the past week or so. It is now quickly turning into a large-scale student movement, demonstrating the Punjabis and the students' identity and independence from the central government of India. Despite huge restrictions and police presence in Chandigarh yesterday on the 10th of November, students rallied and gathered in their thousands to stand in solidarity against the central government reforms designed to take control of Punjab University. Over the last week, you would have heard reports of changes to the structure and control of the university by reducing the Senate from 90 elected individuals to 31, which have been selected by the central government. This would have removed complete independence and control from the students and the lecturers and the teachers and alumni right directly into the hands of the central government. And this has been a long-standing policy of the central government to exert its control not only on Punjab's natural resources but also at the core of its education system. So the rebuttal of that order was a backtracking and a victory for the students, but it doesn't stop there. What this has highlighted is the complete lack of trust that ordinary Punjabis now have in the central government. They were trying to reshape Punjab University's structure. That has now failed, but it will not stop there. The youth have now got together and their central voice is not only to free Punjab University from any control of the central government, but also to reclaim back Chandigarh as the capital city for the Punjab as it rightly was. So this movement is ongoing. More and more students from across Punjab are joining. The government has deployed the police and no doubt will deploy further restrictions on gatherings. They've already implemented laws that prohibit the gathering of more than 4 people, and we've seen assaults and arrests of not only students but also members of the public who are joining their support for the students. So this just further highlights the repression of Sikhs in Punjab and in India. So we support the students of Punjab University, the wider students of Punjab, and we stand with them for their cause and their fight, not only to free Punjab University, but also to reclaim Chandigarh as the capital of Punjab.
That's interesting, of course. You can immediately start to see that this is bigger than just a simple protest about the governance of the university.
Right.
Again, Jas is talking about bringing Chandigarh back in as the capital of Punjab, of course, after 1966, when the States Act split up Punjab yet again into Punjab and Haryana. Again, that was another split even after 1947, when the whole Punjab was split into 2 after partition. So again, you can start to see the bigger issues of bringing Chandigarh back in, which is only a step away really from the whole Khalistan cause as well as the establishment of Khalistan. So again, you can start to see how this movement, what's going on in the university at the moment, has the potential to grow into a much bigger thing. And again, the more people that pour into Chandigarh to support this protest, the bigger it gets and the more momentum it builds, and of course the bigger issues that can then start to be addressed. And as I say, it's starting to build momentum. This has so much potential, and we certainly from Satluj, we send our support and our love and support to the protesters. Get out there. Well done to what you're doing. Keep it peaceful. Most importantly, do keep it peaceful. Do not give the authorities the opportunity or the excuse to wade in violently against you, as indeed they're just waiting for that opportunity. But all you need to do is keep a peaceful protest. Ironically, follow the tenets of Gandhi. You know, that was so successful. So let's borrow from Gandhi's tactics that worked so effectively against the British. Keep it peaceful, but certainly get out there there, be enthusiastic, and be totally motivated and passionate, as indeed they have. And don't forget, students have so much less to lose. They have this ability to get out there and literally change the world, because they're not just driven by such deep passion, but they have a lot less to lose. The state has a lot less control over them. So again, James, there we go. Fingers crossed that this does actually turn into a much, much bigger movement.
Absolutely. And you can see how it continues to grow, at least from our perspective and what we're seeing here in the West. And that is good news, because the power of numbers is the multiplying factor. And yeah, I think that they've definitely gotten the attention of those they needed to reach. And I believe that change is inevitable at this point.
Indeed. So again, we'll keep reporting on that. Keep an eye out. And of course, if you in the audience have any news from Chandigarh, do let us know, because it's very difficult, obviously, to get news. We can't get anything out of the Godi media, unsurprisingly. So we're totally reliant on sources directly coming from Punjab and Chandigarh to feed us what's actually going on the ground at the moment. So do let us know. Don't forget, you can email us directly. Do send us an email if you have any information. We need to know what's going on actually on the ground. Right, James, let's move on. And I'm going to talk about beards. Yes, beards in the US military. Oh, here we go again. This story just won't go away. And actually, I'll tell you what, before I come on to beards, I'm just going to quickly cover the trucking story. There's been a few issues, of course, related to the trucking industry in the US. And the Sikh Coalition, again, this Sikh lobbying organisation in the US, they've jumped on this trucking story, because, of course, it does have such a big impact on the Sikh community in the United States. There's something like 150,000 Sikhs involved in the US trucking industry. Now, as we do know that after a couple of terrible accidents and incidents related to Sikh truck drivers, particularly illegal immigrants who happen to be Sikhs, driving trucks that turned into tragic accidents. As a result, the Trump administration, the knee-jerk reaction was to clamp down massively on the trucking industry and bring in all sorts of, what they call a new interim final rule, this IFR, that the Trump administration brought in last month. What this did, it stripped many different classes of immigrants from obtaining or renewing non-domiciled CDLs, these commercial driving licenses. In other words, if you're not a resident, if you're not a US citizen, you now cannot get a CDL, apparently. Now, the change is not being made on the basis of the proficiency in the English language or any other qualifications. It's simply an argument that non-domiciled CDL holders are inherently dangerous to the public. And this is why the Sikh Coalition have jumped on this, saying, no, this is just not right, this is not fair. So, as a result, it's potentially removing 194,000 from the workforce. This is massive. Don't forget, this is the supply chain. This is the United States supply chain of food, of goods, of consumables, everything. So if you're removing 194,000 people from that supply chain, this is going to have a really, really big impact on simply the shelves in your stores. Certainly there are going to be potential food shortages, etc. So again, there's a little bit of lack of foresight in this. Anyway, the Sikh Coalition, unsurprisingly, they are opposing this IFR, and they've launched this initiative. This really is why I want to talk about this story just quickly first, is that they've launched a new initiative, and it's an appeal to the US Sikh community. Get involved in this. If you're connected particularly to the trucking industry, or you have any stake in the trucking industry, you can actually take action yourself. Again, I often talk about grassroots activism. This is where you actually can influence what's going on and assist the Sikh Coalition in this pushback on this. As they've put up on their website, they've put up a link on this website to help lobby against this. And what they've done, they've actually put up a load of templates. So in other words, they've made it really easy for you. You just need to click on one of these links, go on the Sikh Coalition website, click on one of the links that you can see up here, and it will basically set out for you this template, this IFR comment for truckers, trucking company owners. In other words, whatever your stake is in the trucking industry, click on the relevant template, and it will set everything out for you that will then send off a message to your local political representative to lobby against this. Now, there have been a lot of people involved in this. The Sikh Coalition, obviously, as always, at the forefront of this. They've actually submitted what's called an amicus brief, which is basically it's just a legal document, provides loads of legal evidence to support a legal argument. So they've submitted this amicus brief to two lawsuits that are currently ongoing. And basically, these lawsuits are attempting to stop the administration from continuing to implement this rule that they've brought in. And the Sikh Coalition, as I say, brought in loads of partners, including the Asian Law Caucus, who provided obviously very specific law expertise, and the Gurdwara Sahib of Stockton, Jakara Movement, SALDEF, United Sikhs, California Sikh Youth Alliance, and Umid Hope have all joined forces again. So this large coalition have got involved in this to lobby against this legislation. Now, also, as part of this overall initiative, the Sikh Coalition have launched this Know Your Rights training for anybody involved again in the Sikh, in the trucking industry, and they're going around, particularly California specifically, but also around the US, launching these Know Your Rights training things. So, in other words, they're saying, do come along and learn about what your rights are as a Sikh trucker, and you'll get all sorts of expertise, legal advice, etc. And they have, in fact, in their press release, they said they have actually approached the Department of Transport, but they say the DOT is continuing to stonewall any request for more information. So clearly, the US administration is not at the moment open to this or open to any discussions. Clearly, with these legal cases going on, they're just going to leave it up to the courts to decide on these things. But anyway, as you can see here, the next initiative is in Indianapolis. So if you're involved in the trucking industry or you have a stake in it, and you're in Indianapolis or in the region, do get along this Sunday to join the Sikh Coalition, where again you'll be given loads of advice about your rights and your abilities to push back on this. So there you go, James. Very, very pertinent to anybody in the US involved in the trucking industry.
Absolutely, and they're attacking at all fronts. And I mean, here in Canada, we've seen that big fraud when it came to the commercial driver's license. There's just been a big revelation in Australia with the same issues of fraudulent driver's licenses. But what I find interesting is that they are in the US now accusing Newsom of issuing over 10,000 fake and fraudulent driver's licenses. And I just shake my head going, okay, but Newsom is not at the motor vehicle office stamping driver's licenses. That's up to the people that are hired to do that. So again, it seems like they are attacking the trucking industry on many different levels. Rightfully so in some cases where there is actual fraud, but it's worrying me that there are people who are being just wrapped up in this by association with maybe a bad trucking company or what. They get their licenses pulled and it's miscategorized as a fraudulent license when it's actually the company that they're driving for through no fault of their own that are wrapping them up in it.
Yeah, Governor Newsom, that name always springs back, doesn't it, when there's any attack on the Sikh community. So anyway, let's. I just need to quickly cover the story about the beards, actually, because we're running out of time. This is an important story. Pete Hegseth, he's the Secretary of War, as he's been named. He's, of course, brought in was this dreadful piece of legislation, which, and he made this announcement that blanket ban on beards in the US military. I mean, it's a ridiculous, outrageous sort of thing to make. And as I said at the time, it's a really clumsy, idiotic, ill thought out piece of legislation that's brought in. Anyway, as a result of this, 50 congressional members have actually sent a letter to Pete Hegseth regarding the proposed changes to this Religious Accommodations Act in the US Armed Forces. And the letter itself, and again, I'll just show you, where is it? Here we go, yes. It's quite a long letter. It goes to a few pages. I'll just show you so you can see it. So this is the letter. Loads of signatures at the bottom. I'll just quickly give you a few highlights from this. It includes statements like, to remove or severely restrict religious accommodations in the US military is to turn away qualified individuals who would otherwise pursue a career of meaningful service. And doing so will impact troops who currently have these accommodations. It devalues their contributions, not just Sikhs, but Jewish, Muslims, Christians, Rastafarians and others who volunteered to fight for our nation. So again, it's a bit of an own goal, as they're pointing out. It would be a moral failing if those who voluntarily put their lives on the line for our country are deprived of the very rights they signed up to fight for. Again, this sort of paradox saying, look, these guys are fighting on your behalf and you're actually turning this whole freedom, they're fighting for freedom, and you're now trying to restrict their very freedoms. Again, the irony is it sits very deeply in this. And the letter also asks for the following three questions to be answered. Firstly, whether religious accommodations for facial hair for troops with sincerely held religious beliefs granted between 2020 and 2025 will be maintained and respected. In other words, there are those who for the last 15 years have already been allowed to wear beards. What's going to happen to them? You're going to suddenly say, well, you can no longer be a soldier, or you've got to shave it off. So you've got to clarify, what about the existing, those who already have an existing accommodation? Secondly, whether these accommodations for facial hair for troops with sincerely held religious beliefs pending before the September the 30th memorandum will be processed in accordance with the DoD instruction, it's one of the paragraphs of the DoD instruction, and the RFRA. The RFRA is the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. That's the RFRA. And finally, whether each service branch, particularly those who have made their policies more efficient and more compliant with both the RFRA and the fundamental American value of religious freedom, will have the latitude to assess its religious accommodations process free of top-down directives. So this basically saying is, look, there are already branches of the US military who've found workarounds that work with this. They've found accommodations to allow Sikhs to operate in their branches without a problem. But are you now saying that they will now be imposed upon from top down? In other words, Hegseth's demands will now completely overwrite these accommodations that already exist and already work. So again, they needed clarifications. As I said at the beginning, it has been signed by 50 signatories, and I'll just show you all these the pretty signatures of all the US politicians. There we go. That's the list of it, and their actual signatures. I just want to show the actual signatures just to prove how genuine this is. There you go. So they're all the signatures of the caucus who signed that. Loads of those, and for those of you who actually want to actually have a look who's actually signed it, there you can freeze frame that and have a look at those signatures. So there you go, James. This is a story that just will not go away until the US military, and certainly Peter Hegseth, starts to see the light and starts to realise what a stupid, idiotic demand this is. Of course, things have worked perfectly well for the last 10, 15 years. Sikhs have become an integral part of the US military, served as always with distinction. And they've managed to do it with beards. So why change it, James?
Absolutely. And we can go to the stories we talked about last night about the great heroic Sikhs that have served ever since World War One. In the British and the Canadian and the US militaries, and what they've accomplished. And believe it or not, they did it with their beards, with their turbans, and with pride.
Yeah, exactly. So let's hope common sense prevails in the forthcoming weeks. We'll see. Anyway, fingers crossed that letter actually has some impact. Right, James, let's move on as the clock counts down onto our comments column. Loads of comments. Thank you, as always, to our wonderful audience for all your contributions. All very much appreciated. Now, a weird one from Human Being 01. I was trying to understand really what this was attacking, but these white Americans are laughing at your stupidity and taking advantage. Shame on you. Now, I don't know if this person thinks that me and you, James, we're Americans, or it's and I couldn't work out any story that we've talked about that could be interpreted as Americans laughing at your stupidity and take advantage. All I would say in response is that human beings will always take advantage when they see weakness. In other words, but this is why they struggle with the Sikhs, because the Sikhs rarely show weakness. Shame on you. I don't know, James. I don't know if you have any interpretation of that comment. Oh, James is frozen. We've lost James. Okay, not to worry. Apologies for that. We seem to have lost James temporarily. We'll come back to James, hopefully, when he reappears. TC, one of our other regulars. Thank you, Angus and James. First-class journalism. Well, bless you. Thank you for that. And, of course, you talk about sovereignty and the level of transnational repression. It is indeed shocking. But, of course, this and should be addressed as the elephant in the room when discussing trade deals. Sadly, and this, again, comes back to the discussions about the G7, unfortunately, human rights do tend to get brushed under the carpet when it comes to talk about trade deals. But all I would say is, as I talked about earlier, yes, we have to present the Khalistan cause as a solution. James, you're back. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened. My internet just crashed, and yeah, there we go. We're back.
Not a problem. Anyway, let's move on. So thank you, TC, for that. And you're absolutely right. As I said, we must present Khalistan as a solution to solve a lot of these issues. Now here we go about the terrorist bombs. Loads of comments about the bombings. James, as we've talked about earlier. TC, again, in fact, it was really all our regulars. Thank you to all our regulars who commented on this. And unsurprisingly, all are pretty united in this, and in the belief that the bombing in Delhi was it's not impossible that it was a false flag attack, James.
Yeah, and I'm kind of leaning away from that in my personal opinion on it. However, I do accept and understand that it very well could be, but I'm kind of leaning towards the other direction that these guys panicked and somehow it inadvertently went up at that intersection.
Yeah, and I wouldn't disagree with that. I think as more and more information sort of leaks out, I think obviously lots of speculation, but it does appear to be like Pahalgam was quite, I would say, more evidently a false flag attack, because that sort of sits in line with Chichen Singh Pura attacks, etc., which we do know was probably a false flag attack. That had the hallmarks of a false flag, but this one, I'd say, there are too many anomalies that make it sort of look a bit maybe it was an accidental blast or whatever. So anyway, we'll see as time unfolds. Hat B did actually make a comment. This is an interesting one. Loads of ricin has been discovered in India, and you actually point to the death of Avtar Singh Kandar, the Khalistan campaigner here in the UK, who died under very, very suspicious circumstances just a few days before Hardeep Singh Nijjar. And it is believed, certainly here in the UK, amongst the community, that he was murdered by India. And he, at least on the face of it, publicly, his death was put down to acute myeloid leukemia, in other words, by natural causes. But of course, it is very likely, as you rightly point out, is that ricin and all sorts of toxins can mimic leukemia. And his death it was so sudden and so suspicious, and particularly around the context of the time and everything, that it was likely that he was murdered by some toxin like ricin by India. So interesting that a load of ricin has been discovered in India, James.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's very interesting to watch. And hopefully we'll get more information on that because unlike the Russians, they like to have their people accidentally fall out hotel windows that don't actually open. So yeah, they're a bit more vocal or a bit more in your face about it. But here it's very interesting because it very well could lead to something here.
Indeed, it could. AST or ASTIR says, much appreciated, gentlemen. Your comment is much appreciated. The world is indeed waking up to the Hindutva RSS lie and the crimes against Sikhs since 1947. Let's hope the Western world quickly put humanity over and above trade with India. Sadly, I think I have to say, unfortunately, that they never will. I think, as we've discovered, maybe we're a bit naive in hoping that the West would put human rights over and above trade deals. It won't. The evidence has always perpetually, almost without, I can't even think of an exception, where human rights have always trumped trade deals. As I said earlier, sadly, the dollar seems to be the overriding priority with any human being, whether it's in China, India, or the United States. Unfortunately, humanity and human rights always seems to come a little bit lower down the pecking order, James.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that we don't hear as much from the international human rights organizations about these topics that we used to. We used to hear a lot more from Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, whereas now it's more just online and
Oh dear, we seem to have lost James again. Unfortunately, his internet.
Different governments actually funding.
Oh, no, we're losing James. He's obviously got a bit of a dodgy connection today. There's obviously Hindutva activity. Are you back, James? Are you back? We lost you temporarily.
Apparently I am, yep, but we can move on here.
That's right. I was just saying, I bet Hindutva are out there pulling your wires out outside your house.
I think it's the storm that we've got going on here.
Oh, that's probably more likely. So anyway, final set. Amma Cairo. Now, this made me chuckle. Angus, I just saw you on a Legacy Wills advert. Well, I have to admit, yes, I must confess, I have over the years done all sorts of different jobs, and I have appeared in all sorts of promotional videos for all sorts of weird and wonderful things. I must confess, I never actually see these things that I record. They are promotions for all sorts of things, whether it's Legacy Wills or anything, or it's a central heating boiler. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm trying to make a living, and so yes, my face is quite often seen on all sorts of weird adverts for all sorts of things. And in fact, actually, I've done a lot of English language training, and it might even be one of my commenters a few years ago said that they'd heard my voice on an English language training course. Yes, it's quite likely if you're learning English, one of the world's larger English language training companies have actually used myself and my voice to help people learn English, James. So as I say, both of us, we do tend to do other gigs as well, just to try and make a living.
Absolutely. And, I'm still very active in the film and television industry in Vancouver here. So, yeah, we got to do what we got to do to pay the bills.
So thank you, Amakara, for finding that a laughing emoji, as it does make me chuckle too. Bobby Singh says, our knowledge about India and its history is incredible. Well, I wouldn't say it's incredible, but we certainly are learning an awful lot. And it has. We often talk about this learning journey. As I say, the one thing I do really note very often is India. We in the West have always had this sort of very traditional view of India, this very peaceful, spiritual land of India, and it's wonderful history. It's part of the reason why I'm a big lover of India and the Indian people. It does have a hugely rich, diverse culture and history. It's a wonderful country. But what we have learned is you peel back the layers, you dig beneath the surface, and there is sadly this dark undercurrent that exists in India, and this is again what we're trying to highlight. So yeah, it's a bit of a double-edged sword on this one. It's a two-tone feeling towards India. There is this sort of warm, fuzzy feeling about what India and its cultures represent, but also there is this very dark side, James.
Absolutely. And, we always like to remind people that it's not that we hate India by any stretch. We love India. We love the people of all different sorts. And it is the extremists and the Hindutva and the RSS. These are the things that we're calling out, not the general population.
Exactly. It is we essentially, although they don't realise it, we're fighting on behalf of the majority Indian population, particularly the lower caste.
That's right.
And anybody who is suffering under the Brahmins. We turn our attention to the ruling elite of India, as indeed the ruling elite of the West. We're not. We are pretty open-minded in our attitudes towards the ruling elite of all nations, and we'll call out hypocrisy and evil wherever we see it. Anyway, and then the final set goes to Quite Lean, who says, "Thank you both for highlighting Sikh issues." And Satinder Hussain says, "Great authentic news. Thank you for dedication for the news you bring with your hard work." Well, yeah, it is hard work, but we love what we do. We are driven because, again, the whole purpose of Satellite TV, with our alignment with Sikh, is because it aligns with our own personal views, James. It's a very easy job to do, isn't it?
It is, and one that we take great pride in.
Indeed, we absolutely do, and we hope our audience appreciates it. Certainly, Rajwinder Kaur does by saying Khalistan Zindabad, and as indeed many of our commenters have done so. Khalistan Zindabad. We are all united in this one single cause, and as we often say, it's only a matter of time now. And as I say, our thoughts are with the protesters in Punjab right at this very moment. We wish you guys the very best. Don't forget, ultimately, where this could lead. You know where you should be taking this protest. But anyway, I'll leave it up to you guys on the ground. Best of luck and do stay safe. But in the meantime, that's it for another day. And indeed, another week. Another week has passed already. Don't forget to keep an eye out for my podcast talking about the university protests. My podcast will be up tomorrow talking about that, so do keep an eye out for that. But that's it for another day. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget you can message us directly at message@satellitegt.com. It's anything you'd like to bring to our attention directly. But in the meantime, thanks so much for watching. It is a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.